So we are going to learn a lot today then. All right, I am going to share my screen and we will play this first video here. First off, is this too loud? Or is it okay for everybody? Okay, all right, here we go.
Imagine there was a tool that could help solve world hunger, depression, and bring communities closer together. Now imagine if this tool was readily available to each and every one of us. The tool I'm talking about is your cell phone. It may be seen as one of the biggest distraction devices for our petty amusement, but the reality is your cell phone can act as a catalyst for change in the 21st century. We've all heard the analogy that social media is like a drug, and we've seen the ads from the 1990s on how your brain is supposed to look on drugs. Something like 2 eggs in a frying pan. Have you ever asked yourself, though, what your brain looks like on social media? Ladies and gentlemen, I want to show you what your brain looks like on social media. We've all been here before, stuck for countless hours, sunken into our couch, watching YouTube, scrolling through Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, watching through countless emails to then wonder, what's happened? Where did our time go? One of the worst problems I see with the online sphere, though, is our relationship building skills. We have people trying to sell us on a constant basis without really offering us anything. They copy and paste the same messages to hundreds of people looking for their first sucker and who's going to buy their product. I live by the principle that the secret to living is giving in the most simplistic sense. And as Friedrich Nietzsche said it best, he used a word. He called it Mitfreude. The English translation means joy. He said that it's easy to imagine the pain of others, but to imagine the joy of others and to rejoice at it is one of the highest privileges of our civilization. Wouldn't you agree that this is a great way of thinking and shaping our perception? I want to ask you a question. As we look at the internet era, do you think it's a coincidence that narcissism is rising and so is the depression rate? Or that anxiety is at an all-time high, yet so is our cell phone usage? We have access to so much information, yet it seems that we can't seem to find the right answers. I have an answer for everybody here that's not only going to allow us to bring communities closer together, but it's also going to allow us to put our egos in check. How many people in this room remember Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs from high school? If you recall, the top of the pyramid is where we're supposed to reach a point of self-actualization in our life. It's supposed to be the pinnacle, what we strive for, that's going to give us a sense of fulfillment. What if I was to tell you, though, that later on in Maslow's career, he actually discovered a sixth missing element, the key, the secret to the success in our lives? It was called self-transcendence. And in simplistic terms, it is the realization that we are one small part of a greater whole and should act accordingly. Thus, the secret to living is giving. The secret to living is giving. That's how you rid yourself of a self-centered ego. That's how you put everything in check. You give without any expectation of getting anything in return. And if you think about it, giving has never become easier, guys, with this thing right here in our pocket. I want to give you an example. We have access to the same information that medical students are using online for free in most cases. We can watch lectures from some of the greatest universities in the world, like Harvard, on YouTube. The best part, and this is one that strikes my heart, is that you can start a business right here in the palm of your hands on your cell phone. It's absolutely incredible. Can you imagine if someone like Mother Teresa had access to the bandwidth of social media, how much more of a change she could have had? Can you imagine if Martin Luther King Jr. screamed, "I have a dream," and it was broadcast across all of our cell phones? How many more lives he could have touched? I'm not saying we're all guilty of this, but these tools are being highly underutilized. We have so much power in the palm of our hands. It's incredible. I know what you're thinking. I'm up here talking about giving back. You probably want a little bit of my story to wonder how I came to this realization. So I want you guys to have a laugh on me. I didn't get into university my first shot. I'm guilty of this. I was a C student in high school. I didn't want to learn about biology. I didn't feel like learning about calculus. Have a laugh on me on this one. I was that gentleman right there. I wanted a way to stand out. I also wanted to make a difference, and I guess that was my way of kind of standing out, pretending I was some goofy type of rapper. But my story was the same as everyone else, in the sense that we were going to university following the same linear path. Get good grades, get high test scores, join special groups. I asked myself a question because I was at a disadvantage. I was a C student, remember? So I thought to myself, what is going to make me irreplaceable? What is going to make me stand out? Clearly not that chain, but. So I asked myself that question because I didn't want to be another resume when we were pitching companies to get in. I knew that there were some very sharp people I was going to school with in university, but I needed a tool. I needed something as a means to stand out. And I discovered something. Everybody was paying to go to school. They were paying for an education, yet a large majority were paying attention to this cell phone and their computers and their laptops. So I saw something. So I started to write my first book when I was in second year of university. Going into my third year, I published my second. This allowed me to launch a successful brand online as an author and speaker. And as you may know, as a 20-year-old or a 20-something-year-old kid, it's hard to be taken as legitimate. So this gave me a backbone to stand on. On top of it, everyone said, you know what? Go join some special groups. I thought to myself, why go join groups? Why don't we start a movement? Why don't we build our own group, get everyone together? So we started a Christmas campaign called Cans for Christmas. And what it did, we fed thousands of people around Christmas time, similar to the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge. And we got everybody going on this movement train, encouraging people to give back. If you didn't want to give money, give your time. And it created some momentum. The sad reality is, though, is that when I graduated university, a large number of my peers, we studied law. They didn't get into law school. Out of the 25 or so that had applied, maybe 5 got in. And these were smart students, smart kids. But they had absolutely no distinguishing factor. They had high grades, same groups, same LSAT score. They weren't allowing the creativity to shine bright. And I might be called somewhat of a shameless promoter, but I used my cell phone at the time. So by the time I graduated university, I had a bigger online network than most people that went to Ivy League schools, filled with CEOs, executives, and recruiters. And what I did was when I seen all these students not getting in, and they're sitting there like, oh my God, I said, here, I'll connect you with some people that might be able to give you a job. That was my way of giving back. And on top of that, I was looking for information. I was hungry for it. So what I did, I started an online television show where we interview high-level performers. And what that did was it allowed me to cut the line to meeting top-level CEOs, executives, and people, and then take that content, package it, and give it out to everybody else for free. And that's how my story came to be. But I want to talk about something else, and not myself, but something that has inspired me immensely using the internet, which is absolutely incredible. There's a company. They're called Kiva. They're a microfinancing and loaning company. Their mission is to alleviate poverty through lending. So for as little as $25, you can completely change someone's life. They have funded over $1.25 billion in loans to over 3.1 million people. Absolutely incredible. The best part, everyone wants to talk in business about a return on investment. They have a 96% repayment rate, which is absolutely incredible. They're helping low-income entrepreneurs, individuals, and students in over 80 different countries around the world. They have immensely inspired me in my career to show you what these devices, the internet, has offered as a tool of giving back. My question to you then is that if you knew for as little as $25 that you could completely change someone's life, would you do it? Do you think that would be a lot more fulfilling than just some of your likes on social media? I think so. I think it would be a great way to start things. Going off of this point though, I want to show you guys some statistics that I find shocking, and they break my heart in one simple answer, and you'll see why. Over 5 billion people on this planet have a cell phone. They have access to one. Over 2.77 billion people on this planet are using social apps like YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, or emails. Yet over 3 billion people on this planet live on $2.50 a day. And it's absolutely heartbreaking that we have so much technology and innovation in our hands. And 3 billion people are living on $2.50 a day. I don't know about you, but I want to frame a reality. And this is something that I've seen on a daily basis, and I think we take for granted. We could all be walking down the street in Ottawa, downtown Ottawa, perhaps Toronto, and you're walking down the street and you see a homeless person sitting there. And we think to ourselves, well, they must have put themselves in that situation. I don't know. And maybe I'll give them $1, I'll give them some money, but it might go to drugs. We don't know their story. We don't know who they are. But we really don't think we can help them. We can't solve that problem. Then you're walking down another street, and all of a sudden you see another homeless person, and another, and you see one with an animal, and you almost feel worse for that animal than you do that living, breathing human being. They're no different than you or I. They have a brain, body, bleed and breathe, just like you and me. But why is it that we feel we can help their animals? We want to help their animals more than these people laying on the streets. And that's something that breaks my heart. We always we lead with the belief that it has to be these political figures or these influencers that are the ones that have to push change. My question to you though is, just because you have more money than someone else, does that mean you're living a richer life? Or just because you have more followers online, does that make you more legitimate than someone else? At the end of the day, every single one of us in this room is an influencer. You harness the same tools these governmental figures are using to push agendas. These same tools these celebrities are selling people with for free, right in the palm of your hands, in your pocket, which is absolutely incredible. And I think we have to lead with the mentality that if I were to fall, I would want someone to pick me up. Because it doesn't matter who you are, what you do, or whatever the acronym is beside your name. Our obligation is to help people. Because if we were in that seat, it would sure help if we could. In my closing remarks, I want to get scientific for a minute to show you how the root of our lives comes together. All of our lives started with a single cell. It was through that cell duplicating and giving of itself that formulated a second cell, and a third, and a fourth. And as this process continued, and these cells kept duplicating and giving of themselves, it now formulated our modern world, which proves at the root of our lives, our basis is to give, and to give ourselves to others. Thank you.
Okay. So one of the main takeaways I think from that one would be, well, actually, no, let's do this differently. What are some of the takeaways y'all can think of for that one?
That even though if we're not rich, we still have a lot of power if we just use it.
Okay, yeah. Something else I was thinking of is that technology is great when used correctly. However, so many people have a cell phone, have this technology, but are using it in a way that hinders their success rather than contributing to their success. You can waste time on social media, or you can find a way to better your own life. All right. So one point I want to say is that technology is great in many ways. It's allowed us to do things that we would have never really been able to imagine to do before, such as having a class in a virtual setting at home during a pandemic, right? But it can very easily sway the wrong way. And it can get us stuck in these grooves and these traps where we end up wasting away so much time of our lives on it, right? Okay. So I am now going to play our next one. It is 18 minutes, which will put us 3 minutes over. So I'll go ahead and play it. But I want to also say while I'm pulling this up that I misspoke. I was misreading my paper, so I apologize for that. Your homework is actually not another debate speech. My brain right now, guys. So your homework is actually going to be on writing a speech using a motivational format, telling your friends that technology can be damaging to their physical, mental, and emotional health. So it's going to be more of a motivational. When you all think of a motivational speech, what comes to mind? What are you trying to do to your listeners? You're trying to
make them want to learn and actually follow through with it, motivate them to change.
Yeah, encourage them, move them, motivate, move them to change, or motivate them to recognize the damages, right? Okay, cool. So keeping that in mind, we are going to play this next video. This is our last one. Like I said, it'll just take us just a few minutes over class. Then you'll be good to go.
Nine years old when I had my first conversation about addiction. It still feels like yesterday. It wasn't drugs or alcohol. My drug of choice was a video game. You see, my parents had had this horrific divorce, and I suspect to ease the pain, my dad came home one afternoon with a brand new, state-of-the-art Atari 2600. This was a very big deal. Spending money was out of the norm for my dad. To this day, he still uses lemons and packets of sugar in his water instead of buying the lemonade at the restaurant. But on that day, after the excitement and shock wore off, my brother and I sat down, set up the console, start playing. Actually, I'd wait for my brother to leave for practice until it was my turn. But once it was my turn, I plugged in the game Pitfall and I proceeded to play for hours. I can still actually remember the sound the cartridge made when you clicked it into place. I kept the game's main character, Harry, running for hours, picking up jewels, jumping over alligators. If I missed even one, I would go back to the beginning and I would start again. I was relentlessly pursuing perfection. I was obsessed with getting the perfect score. But this obsession didn't last long, because out of the corner of my eye, I saw Grandma Drake watching with concern. My grandmother was somebody I treasured deeply in my life. She was the person that kept me centered in a time full of divorce, poverty, and even occasional homelessness. My grandmother was somebody who, no matter what she said to you, it was always honest, sometimes brutally so. On that day, I continued playing. Remember, I was obsessed with getting a perfect score. And at last, I did achieve perfection. She had calmly sat there for hours, waiting for me, and then invited me to come talk to her in her room. It's something that she had done countless times before, but on this day, she sensed that there were some painful realities that I was ready to hear. She talked to me about my family, which I learned was wrought with addiction, drugs, gambling, alcohol, you name it, we had it. But what I was surprised to learn was how deeply addiction ran in both sides of my family. You can say I was doubly blessed with what today I fondly call my genetic lottery. But sadly, I'm not alone. Scientists today estimate that over 50 million Americans will be struggling with the issue of addiction at some point in their lifetime. 50 million Americans. Drugs, alcohol, gambling, pornography, sex, even online shopping can be an addiction. And today, these are some of our newest. The difference with what I call socially acceptable addictions is that we rarely discuss them. Trust me, no one sat Grandma Drake down to have a conversation about her collection of over 2,000 zebras as a real problem. Today, we have a new socially acceptable addiction, and it is technology. Every day, all around the world, children spend countless hours online, posting to social networks, online gaming, and even just watching videos. The more alarming part about this is that many of these children are receiving their own personal devices now as early as 6 or 7 years old. When you take into consideration the most recent census in the United States that recorded over 21 million children in the United States under the age of 5, and you look at the research that says 85% of American parents have allowed these young children to go online weekly, and in many cases daily since infancy, it means that in the US alone, we have over 17 million children growing up endlessly connected to technology. So when we overlay this excessive use of technology at these critical developmental periods of children's developing brains, it begs the question, could we potentially be creating a new generation of addicts? Let's take a look at the science. In this image, you see a healthy brain. That nice robust red area is our dopamine receptors. In contrast, the brain of a drug addict. The dopamine receptors in this scan are significantly reduced. Now, most people still consider dopamine to be that neurochemical that makes us feel good. But scientists today understand that dopamine has more to do with motivation and reinforcement in our brain's reward center. You can kind of think of it as a do it again system rather than a feel good system. An addict's brain is motivating them to do it again and again. But even natural rewards, like eating food, having sex, they produce the same neurochemical responses. The difference is with drugs, our brain is flooded with up to 10 times more dopamine, which leads the user to repeat that behavior again and again. And it leaves more natural rewards feeling inadequate in comparison. So let's look at what it is to be a technology addict. The scan that we're going to see is a technology addict who has spent routinely 8 hours online, posting to social networks, playing online games, or viewing pornography. As you can see in the scan, the background looks a little different because it's really recent science, but it's the same type of scan that's looking at those dopamine receptors. You can tell that they've been impacted. And when we compare them next to the healthy brain, the damage, obvious. When we compare the technology addict to the drug addict, the parallel in the damage occurring, indisputable. So what does this all mean for us? Well, we're all wired to seek reward. And the tech companies, they now understand how to tap into our primal drives. Companies have begun hiring neuroscientists and behaviorists to work along with their programmers to develop products that keep users hooked. It has gone beyond the goal of merely producing useful products to the point where they are actively seeking ways to keep us all endlessly connected. And if that corporate strategy sounds familiar, it's because it is. One comedian recently said, Philip Morris only wanted your lungs. The App Store wants your soul. I think we can all agree that addiction is complicated. It involves a relationship between a chemical or a behavior in concert with genetics, learning, or the environment. Substance addiction is more easily understood because when we take something into our body, we can feel it make a difference. But with behavioral addictions, it's that much harder to identify because there's no substance, and consequently, that much harder to understand. When we're talking about addiction, what we're really talking about is our brain's struggle for control. If we're able to avoid the substance or the behavior when it's causing us problems, great, we have no addiction issue. But when we lose control and it starts to impact our relationships, our work, our school, our self-esteem, or even our emotional stability, then the vicious cycle of addiction begins. Microstructure abnormalities is a phrase that should stand out to all of us. There are hundreds of studies in development right now by scientists who are trying to find answers to provide us all guidance. Each of the studies is complex, but they're looking at minute regions of the brain and trying to help differentiate between a healthy brain and a brain of a technology addict. Here's the structure generally of a brain. On the outermost area, you can see that is our gray matter. It's primarily responsible for processing our information and our emotions. Housed deeper within the brain is our white matter. It's like the superhighway of our brain. It facilitates messages between the brain to make sure that we get our messages to the right place at the right time so we can act upon them. The scientific research on technology addiction has shown that we have a loss of gray matter in critical areas and a reduced density of white matter within the brain. Even more alarming are the areas of the brain that are being impacted have to do with motor control, cognition, and motivation, as well as areas that process our emotions, our decision-making, and our impulse control. Generally, the 24/7 access to technology is making us more impulsive, disconnected, anxious, and emotionally unregulated than ever. We know now that the more time that children spend online, the more isolated and depressed they become. And the more time they spend viewing carefully curated, digitally altered social media posts, the more inadequate and depressed they feel. You might be asking yourself, well, how depressed can kids really become? Well, one recent study that looked at 32 different hospitals between 2008 and 2015 found that their hospital admissions more than doubled for children aged 5 to 17 years old for self-harm, suicidal thinking, and suicidal actions. Another study reports that there's been a 200% increase in suicides among young girls aged 10 to 14, and a 50% increase in boys the same age. Most of these suicides reportedly related to an online incident. The loss of human connection through face-to-face communication, eye contact, and touch is creating a future for our children in which they have the emotional intimacy, the compassion, and the empathy is disappearing. Our society is becoming more focused on the number of likes our post receives instead of on the human connection that like is supposed to represent. Remember these brain scans? I lose sleep over the unintentional damage to our children's brains under the misguided assumptions that technology overuse is totally harmless. Of course, we can't keep our children from technology, or it would put them at a severe disadvantage in a global economy that requires them to be proficient with it. But I am also acutely aware from my education that something as simple as a smartphone can actually structurally alter my daughter's brain and potentially trigger a lifetime of addiction. The world is going to evolve whether we like it or not, technology especially. And technology has undoubtedly been net positive. However, with all of this good comes some bad. The question for us moving forward is not whether we can figure out a way to have a balanced relationship with technology. It is how quickly we can get there, and what is that healthy, balanced relationship going to look like? I have spent my career learning and understanding and talking about the good and bad of technology. Grandma Drake taught me about myself, but most importantly, she taught me that empowering children with knowledge and then trusting them with that information means that they will often make better choices because of it. We can all step into the light together now because I have proof that that actually works. My team and I have been implementing a program where we've empowered kids and parents and educators with knowledge about healthy, balanced technology use. And the results? Children do in fact make better choices for themselves and for their friends when they're given the knowledge and the opportunity. This is some data from a middle school that I worked in, not unlike any other middle school, likely in the US or in the world, that had escalating issues with technology-related incidents, cyberbullying, inappropriate posting, plagiarism, even sexting. As the graph shows, their technology-related incidents had gone from 40% to 72% of all of their administrative time dealing with this in only 5 years. After implementing our program, the results were actually shocking even to us. Educating kids on how to be a good digital citizen at the same time as giving parents and educators the tools and the resources they needed in order to support these kids through some change, reduce the overall technology-related incidents by over 50%. It proves that when we trust our children with the emerging science, and when we talk to them about the educational and legal consequences that they're facing in every facet of their lives for the rest of their lives, it gives them good direction on how to make better choices in this digital world. I believe all children want to make good choices given the opportunity, but it's up to us in order to educate them on how to do this in this new world. Everything that we do online is public and permanent. So now that we all know this emerging science, how do we all come together to make a difference in this very real issue of technology addiction? The answer is simply awareness and education. This is an amazing time that we're living in, and this, an amazing group of people who have all come together to devour ideas worth spreading. Technology has enabled us to do so much good, but it is not totally without consequence. Pitfall was a really fun game to play as a kid, but it was essentially a stick figure running across the screen in maybe 4 colors. Today's games, apps, programs, much more sophisticated. And the programmers, as we've learned, highly skilled on our vulnerabilities. It is imperative that we come together and we address this issue boldly, honestly, and without fear. We have the knowledge we need to rise above this. Our children are counting on us to become their Grandma Drake. Thank you.
Awesome. So I know we're just a little over. Any remarks, comments on that? Okay. What kind of speech did she just give? Anybody want to take a guess?
Motivational.
I think it goes, yeah. It definitely had motivational components to it. I agree.
Informative.
It did have informative components.
Persuasive.
Yep, persuasive, yeah. There really is no right or wrong answer. I just wanted to see what you all thought about it. It really was. It had different components to it. I do think, so when it comes to persuasive speeches, typically what we're trying to do is persuade somebody to come to our side on an argument. So that would mean like changing their mind about something and getting them to come over to it. And so in the end, typically what a persuasive speech will do sometimes is give a call to action or something. So tell them what to do. Motivational kind of does the same thing though, right? Motivational persuasive can lean on that, rely on that data, that informative part that Kenna talked about. And then a motivational one will rely more on that emotional component. But all three of you are right. They're all the components were kind of there for it. And that can happen. They can kind of blur together and come up there with their own breed of speeches. So the big takeaway is when thinking about your motivational format for your speech, for your homework tonight or this week, when it comes to motivational speeches, you are trying to move somebody, motivate, move them, but with emotion and passion. And so when you are writing, when you're doing your speeches tonight, your speech, or this week, I keep saying tonight, I'm so sorry. You're writing that speech, telling your friends that technology can be damaging to their physical, mental, and emotional health. I want you to kind of focus on that emotional side. If you can put a little personal spin to it, if you feel comfortable putting a personal spin to it, that helps create that motivation. So again, make sure you're focusing on those intros as usual. A great intro for this one would be a short story about your personal life, like what the speaker that we just saw did. She gave like this brief personal story of her own. But once again, you are not obligated to share a personal story unless you feel comfortable and open doing so. But it's just an idea. And that also sharing that personal aspect also gives you those credentials as well. So it double plays on those. Anyways, I won't hold you over. I know I'm already late, but that's the homework. Any of y'all have questions before we log off? All right. And I don't think SAD Club's meeting today, is it? Okay. It looks like Holly is in the waiting room. Should I just let her on and tell her we're not meeting for SAD? Okay. All right. If there are no other questions, yes.
Tell Her the Truth initiative at 5 o'clock. That's our SAD.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. So, so yeah, if there are no other questions, just feel free to reach out to me if you need help along the way. Just be sure you upload your peer evaluation stuff today and get all that stuff in, and we'll see you next week. All right. Bye.